Awesome. Super excited to welcome everyone here. Thanks so much, everyone from Rocket, for coming to welcome Vincent and Ben from Zenika. Vincent and Ben are going to be sharing with us today about interview prep, a very crucial topic that applies to all of us. And they are both consultants at a software consultancy that is French, but they have an office in Singapore called Zenika. And Zenika has done talks with us before, and Carol has helped to organize this event. Thanks, Carol. And we're very excited to have them here and share their expertise with us. Vincent is a senior engineer, has worked at several companies, including Zenika, but also a financial company and Sodi France and Toyota in France. And Ben is actually a bootcamp grad like us. He went to GA in 2020 or 2019 to 2020, was teaching at GA for a while, and has been a consultant at Zenika since graduating from bootcamp. So he has a lot of shared experience with us, and so hopefully that's good for us to relate to as well. And before coding, Ben, I think, was a musician, so he can tell us more about that when he gets to his presentation. So how we're gonna do it, we're gonna have Vincent and Ben share their journey and some tips about coding interviews, and that should take roughly half an hour or so. And the second half hour we're reserving for Q&A, which we are moderating, or I will be moderating through the Pigeonhole, which I'm putting in the group chat right now. So all of you guys should see that chat. That's where you can ask questions. I've copied all the questions you guys posted in the sign up form into Pigeonhole, so feel free to just upvote, and as they're presenting, just ask any new questions that you might have. Cool. Okay, on to you, Vincent and Ben. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great. First, then let me share my screen. Should be on. Let's go. You guys should see something. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
No?
Good.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So just before we start, because it's gonna be very quick in this, we did this slides a few weeks ago at NTU, and it was a 2-hour session, and we're gonna through all of this in half an hour. So obviously it's gonna be very dense. We're gonna go quite fast, but it's still gonna be okay. Anyway, you'll have ample time to ask all the questions if you want to deep dive in some of the topics in the presentation, right? So I will let you in the end of Ben to start this. And Ben, I don't see you on the list of the participant in there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay, so I guess I'll start. My name is Ben, and I'm a consultant from Zenika. I currently work as a full stack developer at GovTech Singapore, where I help them to build platforms for the application and renewal for passes for foreign workers. And we're just going to take a look at a few questions that each one of you should probably ask when you're starting a career in software engineering. So the first question that we're going to take a look at is, what do you want to do? And I think this is the biggest and hardest question, but it is worth spending time figuring this out, because I find that once you do, everything else should start to fall into place. So for me personally, I studied business and marketing in uni. And it was a course that my dad picked out for me because I asked him to, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I graduated from that, and after graduating, I went on to be a financial consultant for about half a year. And that gave me some insight into what I knew I did not want to do, right? But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because it led me to consider other job options, which led me to studying in General Assembly, and I found that I really liked front-end engineering much more than back-end. And the point that I'm really trying to make is that sometimes in order to know what you want to do, you have to do the thing. Sorry, Vincent, I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah. So do to know, right? One of my New Year's resolutions this year was to get good at drawing, and it's already November and I'm still horrible at drawing. And I think the reason for that is that I like the idea of drawing much more than I like actually drawing. So I think that's why I think this question is so important to answer, to have a clear picture on what you want to do. Yep.
Do you want to?
Yep, next slide. So this is the second question, which is what do you need to do? What do you need to get it? And I think that once you have an answer to the first question, like I said, this will start to fall into place. Let's say you want to be a front-end developer. You probably need to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, some sort of front-end framework. And if you want to be a back-end developer, you would need to know Node.js framework, ORM, knowledge of databases, and so on and so forth. And so you can put points into those skills, right? Like in RPG, if you want to be a warrior, you would put points into HP and stuff. So you can look at it that way. Next slide.
Yep.
How I approach skill building. So one of the things I did was to follow communities and see what they were talking about. Communities that were relevant to me. So like places where they would discuss things related to front-end development. And I tried to identify what skills they would be talking about. So if you see topics on React keep coming up, if you see topics on Vue.js keep coming up, then there's a good chance that those skills are currently in demand, and or they are going to be in demand in the future. So I tried to identify these sort of trends and patterns. Next slide. The other thing that I did was to look at job listings. So I would go onto these job portals and look for roles that I thought were relevant to me. So I searched full stack developer, front-end developer, and then I would look at these job listings, and then usually they have a list of requirements for the job. And then based on that, you can sort of get a better idea of what is required to do that role and maybe what skills you might need. But one thing I do want to say is that sometimes these job listings are written by someone with a non-technical background. So do take these with a pinch of salt. Next. So what else do you need to get a software engineering job? I think you should probably have a portfolio. This is has been something that it's been beneficial to me, and there are two main reasons. The first is that I think having a portfolio demonstrates some level of hands-on ability. So if you don't have any experience in this industry, then having some projects under your belt at least demonstrates that you have some level of technical ability. You have the ability to code, right? And the second is that I think that these projects or your portfolio can help to facilitate discussion in an interview itself. So I found that when I put my portfolio on time to talk about, so the interviewer will ask me a question about the projects on my portfolio. So like why did you build this? Why do you choose this tech stack? What challenges do you encounter along the way? And I think these are some very good questions for the interviewer to get to know you better. So yeah, I think you should probably have a portfolio because of these two reasons. Next. Yeah, so if you have an idea, just go out and build it. It doesn't have to be anything groundbreaking. And I think that it's actually better if it's something that's easy for you to understand, because you can focus on learning the skills instead of trying to have to worry about what the project is supposed to do, what are the specifications that are required, and you can actually focus on the skill acquisition. Yeah. Next. So the last question is how to get it, and I think that at the end of the day, this is just the execution phase, and you just have to go out there and do the interviews, right? Next slide. Yeah, so I think that interviewing is a skill in and of itself. So you might have all these skills that you have acquired, you know how to do the job, but you really need to pass the interview to be able to demonstrate any of those skills. So in order to get good at interviewing, you just have to do more interviews. And I think that it's okay to not do well, because every time that you maybe perform not as well as you would like, it's a learning opportunity. So maybe the interviewer asks you something about a question and you weren't able to answer, then maybe that's a gap in your knowledge, right? You've identified that maybe there's something lacking there, and so you can look it up and do better in the next interview. So that's how I mean, it definitely doesn't feel good in the moment, but it's definitely an opportunity to improve yourself for the next one. Something that I found to be very beneficial for myself was to talk to my peers. So after interviews, the questions that I maybe couldn't answer, I would discuss with my classmates. So maybe that's something that you can do. There was a question that I was asked in an interview, and I froze up. Okay, the question is something like this. How many 50-cent coins do you need to stack from your bedroom floor to the ceiling? And I was, I was he asked me this kind of question. So I froze up. I really couldn't understand it. I mean, I really couldn't answer it. So I was complaining about it to my brother, and my brother said, you just make some assumptions, right? Assume that a 50-cent coin is a certain height, and assume that your floor to the ceiling is a certain height. Then you just take the height of the your floor to the ceiling, and you divide the height of the coin, and then that's how many coins you would need. And then I was like, yeah, sure, that makes sense now, but like I probably wouldn't have thought of it. I mean, it was quite illuminating to have the discussion. So yeah, talk to your peers. Everyone has their own ways of thinking about things, right? And I think that having these discussions will open up different ways of thinking. And one thing that I did as well was to just Google top 50 insert topic questions. So if you're going for an interview that they're gonna ask questions about React, then go and see what are popular React questions. I think that there are some questions that do tend to come up over and over again, so it doesn't hurt to go and look at these lists. Next slide.
Sorry, that's mine.
Oh, yeah, I'm done. Okay, on to you,
Yeah,
Vincent.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, I have a bit of a different process in there. That's actually I'm a physicist at first. I didn't study IT, not too much actually, but more math and physics. And it's a bit randomly that I found myself in IT, and the way I got my very first job was very random in IT. And it was not so much about the academic things I've learned about it. And it's because I was always a little bit geeky, you know, when I was like a teenager or mid-later. And I've always used Linux as my computer. So without even knowing it, I had a bit of knowledge about OS administration because I had to build my own Linux, and it worked fine. And I found out like there was a company that was actually looking, they were doing Java and a lot of things, but they also had clients that had to use Linux and some C things, and they had no idea how to compile other things. And it was also not my academic part, but because I did it on the side, then I got the job. That was because I'm a bit old. That was obviously a while ago, but don't underestimate also what you do on your side times, right? Maybe okay, you may be like your Windows on your computer, but it actually serves absolutely no purpose. Linux can do everything you can do, so it's still a little like one more strings on your bow and an extra skill you can get, and that's how I got my first fit into IT. I did three different kind of jobs then later on. Um, it was more in a shape to trying to build a T-shaped skills and profiles. At first, I was doing what we called like it. Nobody do this anymore, like model-driven engineering and model-driven architecture. This is like UML with rectangles and a row everywhere. And I used to do a lot of the official plugins for Eclipse for doing this. So it was like a lot of very old school Java 1.2, 1.3 programming. But then I move on into a more like along the way, right? What was on Edge, then it was a lot of a service orientated architecture and stuff like that. So I move on more to like modern architecture. And then after the years, turn out into more of a DevOps because I've basically touched everything from uh, client OS delivery, all of the things. So overall, you build a lot of different skills. So and then in the end, you can have this kind of things, which is the one of the on one of the periodic table for all the DevOps tools for the people that want to do DevOps, for instance. Don't snapshot that one because actually 2/3 of those things are already obsolete and they can be replaced by a new tool already. But in the end, that's what you want to build, right? Everything you want to do it, you want to focus on one thing, and when you're done doing that thing, try to do another things that's slightly different if you want, and that's how you building a large portfolio of skills in this. So my three main takeaway for all of this is always be curious and stay on edge, so you should be on Twitter right now, or maybe Mastodon, or whatever, or Hacker News to know what's the trend, because if you want a job now, you need to roughly understand what was the IT from 10 years ago up to now to understand the needs of this particular job you have now and the trend for the next 5 years or the next 10 years, because technology you're using now, technology you've been learning, they'll be obsolete very soon. In my 15 plus years career, I had to switch so many times. So in the end, that's why a company would hire you. Even though they would ask you very technical questions about one technology or whatnot, what they want in you is not really the knowledge of that technology. I'm talking for the really good company. It's your learning process, right? Because the company is going to invest in you. the time, the money, and everything. And, in 6 months or in 1 year, maybe technology is going to completely shift, right? Dockers appear, and within 1 year, everything was shifted. When Git appear, everything was shifted. And you really need to find those proper talent that are willing to learn and know about this. And the last one, it goes along with what say Ben also a little bit, is that don't fear to fail at interviews, because unfortunately, and there's no secrets, your very first few interviews in IT, you're probably gonna fail them, and it's gonna be all right, right? Because it's there's you only learn by practicing and doing it, right, in real life. So don't go for your dream job already at first, because you'll fail about it, right? The best chance you have is try to go for 4 or 5 interviews of job that you don't really, they're a bit interested, right? But you don't know, right? You don't feel the vibes for it. But at least it's training, right? You're training your presentation, you're training your technical skills, everything in there, and then you'll see yourself, how to present yourself, for instance. It will evolve a lot from your first interview to your third interview and your fifth interviews. And then after all of this, then you can go and apply for your dream job, your dream jobs with an S. And you will see you will have much, much, much higher chance into succeeding this. So that was a little bit of a all what we did from Ben and me as a presentation. Now we'll try to very quickly, because we have 7 minutes now. We've been a bit talkative. Go through all the differential factors that will make you succeed at an interview, right? So Ben, if you want to come back.
Yep.
Yep.
So I think it's very common for people after they graduate to really feel like you haven't learned anything. Or maybe that isn't so accurate, but you've learned some things, but now that you have learned a little bit of things, you think, wow, there's so much more to learn. So actually, in comparison to what I need to know, what I know now is very little. And I think it's so common that we have a term for it, which is imposter syndrome, where you feel like you don't know what you're doing, or you're just not confident in your skills. But I think that when going through this process, when you're studying and interviewing, and then maybe you don't do so well in the interview, you might have thoughts like these. But I think that we need to be fair to ourselves, right? I think if you compare yourself to the past you from a few months back or a few years back, you'll see that you've come a long way. So just keep improving. Yeah. And in terms of skills, we really want to aim for a T-shaped skill distribution. So the I-shape is where you're an expert in only one thing, and a generalist where you're capable in a lot of things but not an expert in any. And then the last one is the T-shape, where you're capable in a lot of things and expert in one. And the reason for this is so that if you have a wide base, let's say you decide to change your focus, then you can just build off of something that is already in the base and then specialize in that other thing. So yeah, I think that if you are able to do that, you are a lot more versatile. Yeah.
Yeah, this is very important, but don't burn don't go faster than the music. It's building over time, right? You won't have that T shape at first. Right? It requires a bit of years, but it's going through different kind of technology that you can acquire this. Another thing that's also very, very important, and actually for me as an interviewer is the most important, is the soft skill. So it's all about, like, you've probably been reading about this, all the empathy, the listenings, being pragmatics and whatever. In the end, it's just, are you a nice guy? Right. In the end is, do I want to work with you? Do I want you to be part of my team? Can we get along together? Can we actually exchange idea? Do you understand what we say? Can you also have the ability and not be afraid to raise your voice if something's wrong, and all the jazz, right? This is definitely the most important. And I don't want to weight in an interview the weight of the soft skills and the hard skills we have. This, but soft skill is for me definitely the most important when I interview someone, because in the end is just say, are you a nice guy? Do I want to work with you? This is what it is. And because it's all about trust, right? And if I know I can trust you, then you won't pass. Even though you would have an excellent technical result. And that happened to me many times. Not that many times, but quite a few times when I had a technically excellent candidate, like excellent candidate. They nailed everything. But they were in their world, they were not listening. Sometimes they would answer another question because they was not paying attention to me. And then it says, like, what's going to happen in real world, like when we work together, right? So in the end, that's what really important. That's what really makes the difference in between two equivalent candidate. In the end, they're going to go for the nice guy. Even though is a bit less technically skilled, that's okay because he's going to learn, right? But this is definitely by far the most important. Another very important thing is you should be working on a side project. The best thing is if you have a GitHub account and you are already contributing to open source software, please do. You should definitely put in your resume your GitHub account. Even though your GitHub account has have a few tutorials that you did, or maybe your site code, so blah, blah, but it's really show that you are passionate about what you do, and that's definitely a big plus. And on top of that, if you are contributing to open source software, you basically, if you guys been on GitHub, there's issues, you pull a merge request, you pull your code, and then you apply for the code, and then they'll merge it if they do, if they please do. And this is suspiciously like a company process. So you already showing to your interviewer that you know how it works. You not only know how to write proper code, you know the process. And that's also very, very important. So for those of you who don't have a GitHub account, please open one. Try to put your codes into this. This makes a huge, huge difference. When I'm browsing resume, I definitely pay a lot more attention if there's a GitHub. If there's a GitHub, I'm always clicking that link and see what in there, right? So there's always a big plus. I say GitHub, but if you want to host your project on GitLab, it's fine. But show your code. Don't be afraid to show your code. So now, also another good, very, very important thing in interviews, but it goes with soft skills, right? It's about presenting yourself. It's the same as soft skill. For me, it's very, very important, much more important and impactful than the technical skill. You should be able to present yourself in less than 2 minutes, and you don't want to go through all your boring things about, like, from this year to this year, I've been working to this company, and what I've did, well, I did the requirement, I wrote the code, I did the test, and nobody cares, right? You should be very impactful in 2 minutes, saying so what you like, why you want to work, why do you like IT, and why are you passionate. Like, this is definitely, when you start the interview like this, and I got someone in front of me that in less than 2 minutes have a very impactful presentation speech about himself, and like, wow, this guy know where he's going. He's have a very pragmatic mind. He know how to present himself. This is a big plus. So during the original, so you've seen this thing, maybe for some of you, you've seen this one, right? You have to be in the middle, right? You know, you don't have to be like just reality and says like assistant to the emperor, only your role. You know, you want don't invent, right? Never. But try to also put on what you aspire to, you know, what you're doing on the side. Just not just the cold out assistant to emperor, but also don't go on the other way as the LinkedIn things where you add like everything and things, right? We know some of this are really not true when you go in an interview, right? That we're really good with so many people, right? We know what's lie and not lie, so don't try. So it's try to. We did this exercise with the student at NTU about with the groups of people, and they were presenting themselves. They were trying to prepare a speech of less than 2 minutes to present each themselves. Try to do that yourself, maybe if you want. This is very important. If you show up to an interview and the interviewer asks you to present yourself, you should be ready to deliver that less than 2 minute, very sharp, on point speech about what you're actually doing in this interview room. Right? This makes a huge plus, and it puts the interviewer in a really good mind. Right? So then what to expect on those kind of things, right? On the very technical point of view. So you've got the questions, right? The quiz. So we've got the good, the bad, and the ugly questions. There are three kinds of questions. You can have this kind of questions, right? Can you access a non-static variable in a static context? What is the difference between a list and a tuple in Python? You know, this kind of thing. Those are, and what happens when a Docker container runs out of memory? Those are very basic questions regarding your academic level, and you should be able to answer these questions. Those are really the 101, and this is the I would say the kind of the bad questions, because they don't differentiate anyone, but you should be able to answer these questions. When you have this kind of questions, you say like, and if you cannot answer, then it's bad sign. But has Ben said, you know, it means that you still have to progress for the next one. But those are the questions that you have to answer. Then there is the good questions. Those one shows that you have a really good interviewer in front of you. And those questions are slightly different. They can be very tricky, and those are hard questions, right? But it is, for instance, what is Springs and why it is so often used in Java? Or can you explain in your term what's the event loop is? Because it's asking you, what have you understood? You know, it's not just the quiz questions like the previous one, you know, you don't know, you know? And sometimes it doesn't mean you were a bad engineer, right? That you don't know these questions. It should be right, but this one of it. This one is, what have you understood from these concepts, right? Those, and they expect you to speak like for at least 2 or 3 minutes to explain what are these questions, especially when it says what's interesting is in your own term, right? What have you understood of what is the event loop in Node, for instance? Those are really good questions. And usually it's kind of a rabbit hole of questions, because you will start to speak, for instance, for Spring, you will start to mention IOC, and then it will jump right in and say, so what's IOC for you, and blah, 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 and keeps talking. So those are really the good questions. And then you have the really ugly questions. You have, for instance, this one, why CoreOS prefer to store password than the string in Java? Those are extremely hard questions. Even a senior will have really hard time explaining, you know, all of this. Those are very tricky and really hard questions. Those are the trap questions, right? It's okay to say, I don't know. It's just to test you if you're trying to come up with something, right? Because it's okay to say, I don't know. Because in real life, in your work, you will sometimes say, oh, this, oh, I don't know. And it's totally, oh, let me look on Google, right? So these questions are traps to see if you're trying to, come up with some weird explanation. And it's much better to say, maybe you will try to explain like how store what's a string in Java, for instance, what's a car array, but then you don't see, you understand the concept, but you don't see why. And it's perfectly fine. So those are the quiz and questions there. Then you've got the live coding. Live coding is extremely stressful. So there's no secret to it. You'll have to practice. Even the very simple algorithm turns out very complex. I've seen interviewee completely shut down on this, right? What we found out is the best way to be distressed and know what it is to talk, think out loud. Always from the very beginning, ask questions. Always be talking about what goes through your mind. Always, always, always. And then the interviewer will guide you, right? Maybe a little bit. And it's okay because everyone knows it is actually a very, very stressful questions. But for this, there's no magic things about coding exercise in life, right? Practice, 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 practice. There's no shortcut for this. Then you've got the home coding. Then quickly, yeah, you're still there.
Yeah, so for home coding, I think it's not only about the code, and really you should spend the fact that it's at home means that you can sort of take some time to look at what are the requirements, look at what it is you need to get working, and do it in a sort of a less stressful environment. So really, if you get a home coding assignment, make sure you use that time well, and yeah, prepare a lot of time and don't do last minute, and really follow the instructions, don't rush, and just make good use of the fact that it's a home coding assignment. Yeah.
And then to finish, it is my favorite way to conduct an interview. That's actually how I conduct my interviews. It's role play. It's not so frequent here in Singapore for the few interviews I've done around, but it started to be more and more popular. And it's basically a whiteboard and the candidate and us, and we have a subject, right? My subject sometimes, and it doesn't matter if I give you one of my favorite subject, for instance, is like usually the candidate show up with the resume, right? So I'll say, oh, let's build a small application that display resume trends, like a very ultra mini LinkedIn. We have a whiteboard, and let's start from scratch, like a greenfield. You lead discussion and we'll build the whole architecture, maybe a bit of code, and everything. We'll go from front, backs, and this is a way I can scan the general knowledge of the candidate. I can see how he behaves, like how he would behave in a usual, meeting. And this is extremely telling, very extremely telling. But it can be also a little bit daunting, but usually candidate, they love this. Even the one that fails miserably. And if I have quick tips for you about this is ask tons of questions at the beginning, because even through the subject they give you about this, there's already tons of questions that should come into your mind, right? How many users? What is the functionality? What do we want? What do we aim? How is the access? Is it an internal application? Do we go on the internet? All those kind of things, right? And I've seen too many times candidate that just deep dive into what they think and to what think there is their own solution and just go down there without ever knowing that There's another one that says builds me a software, a CI/CD tool process. And they don't even know if it's for just one project or 1,000 projects around the world, right? So about this always has tons and tons of questions. But if you are having a role play, usually you're at what I would qualify a nice interview, because they won't really assess who you are, right, and how you belong, and not just the technical quiz of like Evan. Sometimes the interviewer doesn't really know, he just Google himself the things, and he assumed that the candidates should probably know a little bit better. I think well, to get to Ben, so you should never leave an interview without asking many questions. There should always be 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the end. Always has tons and tons of questions. How do you work? The process is it agile? What are they doing? What is their weekly life, right? What they do on Monday? How do they ship the code? And everything. You should ask tons of questions. It's very important for you. It's not only to show interest, right, or faking showing interest, right? It's for you also to know, because if the answer comes as a yes at the end, you only had that interview to know what the real job would be at the end, right? So don't forget to ask about questions. You have the right to ask all these questions for this. And that's all we had for you. Sorry that was like very, very fast. This is normally a little bit longer talk, but now we can go to QA, and if you want to come back to some of the subjects we approach in there, do not hesitate.
Awesome.
We're there to answer you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Vincent and Ben, for the talk. I think we're going to jump right into the Q&A because we don't have that much time left. I'm gonna. Oh, right. There's something about that Telegram link.
No. Yeah.
Oh, that's the mails.
Forget about it.
Oh, okay. So I am looking at the pigeonhole where we have everyone's questions. I just put it in the chat again, and I will be moderating.
Sharing.
Awesome. And I'll just be moderating, and we'll just have an open chat. I don't think we need to share a screen for this, but so everyone can see everyone. I'm just going to start off with Annabelle's question about leet code and algorithms, because we were just talking about the types of questions that we see in interviews. And I think there are a few questions around this. So I'm just going to start in that domain. So Annabelle's question was, how much leet code did you practice for your interviews on average?
That's been a long time. So it really depends on your seniority, right? Because after a few years, nobody will ask you this kind of things, right? It's just to give you, it's always a very beginner questions, and you should practice, but maybe not on leet code. What you should do is definitely know the main sorting algorithm and data structure, like all the kind of tree, hash tree, and every data structure, like for instance in Java, like map, all of this. You should be able to code them yourself. There's a very excellent exercise that one of the engineering school in France does at the very first year of the program. It's kind of really harsh. It is their selection process, but it's very, very effective. They have like 2 weeks to rewrite all the basic library of C. So everything that is queue, list, and everything, all the basic libraries of C, they have to rewrite it. So yeah, focus on sorting and data structure. All of this is the main things that are going to go. If you know what's a binary tree, and all of this, you're good to go. So don't focus too much on those kind of questions. Just make sure you know the algorithm.
Ben, did you have any experience coming out of a bootcamp on this?
Yeah, leet code. I think do them when you're ready, and do as much of them as you can really while you're still productive. Because I find that if you just keep grinding the code, at some point you're just kind of out of it, and it doesn't become it starts becoming a pretty bad waste of time. I mean, not a good use of time. Sorry, not a waste of time. So I would say, yeah, do them to keep them in your mind, but don't keep grinding them. Yeah, I would say.
Annabelle, does that answer your question?
Actually, I don't think I was the one that asked this
Oh, you
question,
want?
but
Oh, oops. Sorry.
yeah, no worries. But I think probably someone in the panel actually asked the same question. But I think all of us have similar. I think all of us had this question in our mind as well. Like how much leet code practice do we have to put in as well? But yeah.
Well, there's one thing behind this is that if you want to do Java, for instance, or JavaScript or whatever, right, whatever language, you should be fluent in that language. Does it mean you know every library? No. It's okay to go on Google or ask your interviewer about this library, or you should be able to, like in I don't know, in Java, if you're having a stream and you're like, what's the finisher of this? Like, it's a collectors to list plus like it's all right, right? But you should be very fluent into just writing basic good code right into this. Definitely. Plus the algorithm, and you're good to go. Definitely. People will pay a lot more attention to the algorithm itself and your process of thinking than actually the code in itself.
Cool. And so earlier we walked through some of the tips for going through interviews, like thinking out loud during interviews, or when you take home, just make sure you take your time and start early. I'm just transitioning to Monica's question, which is more generally for entry-level software engineers and especially career switchers like us. Right? Any general advice for us starting out in a junior or entry-level role?
That's a very wide question. I think the best things is try to answer the three questions we asked before honestly to yourself, right? That's definitely the first steps. It's like what I'm actually doing in IT. What part of IT do I like, right? Do I like playing with like commands on Linux, and maybe you will have a bit of an ops, you will probably try to go on to Docker, Kubernetes and other things. You try to like build strong algorithms and maybe go backend, or maybe many people's like, so I want to play with CSS everywhere and makes good things, look good, sharp. There's no general rule of thumb for this. Is listen to what you want to do, right? And don't worry, this will change over time.
Monica, did that answer your question?
Oh yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so there are some and related to that question about tips for career switchers. We have I think related questions because right, in the current climate, we know that there are companies that are tech companies that are letting go of employees, including engineers. And so there are engineers on the market, there are CS grads on the market. Any additional advice for how career switchers or bootcamp grads can stand out versus, for example, CS grads?
Show you're passionate, right? If you did a career switch in this, well, obviously, maybe, I don't know, right? I come from physics, and physics is really hard to find jobs. Academics, like pure physics, because you can only be like a university teacher or research, but there's no real job about it, right? So obviously, when you go into IT, there's tons of jobs, and you're more secure, you have like maybe better salary and whatnot. This is not what's gonna make the difference for you. show your interviewer that you did this career switch for something because you're passionate about, like, you discover something in IT and that you really like it. That's really gonna make a difference. For this, I have one of the most like bright and most like effective guy I've met in my career. It was in France at the time. He's actually the head of the whole hardware things for a very, very big startup in France about called Dr. Leet, which is findings, doctor appointments. He started as a clown, as a circus, right? A career switch. He learned everything by himself. This guy, is a boss, definitely. Show you passionate like him, right? This is really gonna what makes the difference. Don't just be there and show that, oh, you did this career switch only maybe for money or whatnot, right? Show you want to do something. That's why you want to have a GitHub, you want to have projects, show that you are, this is actually the path you want to do.
Awesome. That's good advice. And what happens when we are in an interview and we were talking about talking out loud earlier during an interview? What happens if we freeze up? Like any advice for preventing those kinds of situations?
So first, don't freeze up. That would be the thing. Definitely, because this is but it all depends. Like, you know, I'm both way of the mirror, right? Sometimes I do interview and sometimes I'm an interviewee also for my mission. Well, I do a lot more interview. I conduct a lot more interview that I am actually interviewed. But those sometimes, you know, there's interview that can last 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. And your brain start to, you know, fume a little bit, right? It's like you've been consuming too much sugar. And it's okay to like take a breath, you know, like take a deep breath, because your interviewee also can be very tired, right? You know, because it's quite demanding in terms of resources. But yeah, try to avoid the freeze. And what do you freeze, right? Is it because you're thinking too much and think out loud? Or is it because you don't know? If it is because you don't know, simply say you don't know. And try to work out like the question that I said, for instance, like what's the difference of why we prefer using char array for password instead of strings, you know, in Java. If you don't know, do not freeze. Try to say, oh, okay, so a char array in Java is this, an array represents this, a string is actually this kind of structure, is a class is different. Why would need a password? A password we need to not be accessed by memory, for instance, all those, but then you cannot get the answer and it's all right, right? You know, you just explain your train of thought.
Yeah.
And then in the end you said, oh, I don't know. And it's fine, you know, it's fine to say, I don't know in an interview. Maybe, yeah, it's hard to listen to, but actually it's fine to say, I don't know.
Awesome. Nicole, I hope that answers your question as well about what to do when we have not sure how to answer the question. We're just going to move on to another theme of questions, which is choosing companies. So Wei Tian had a great question. Are there any differences in starting a career at a consultancy like Zenika versus one that is not? Learning curve, culture, or interview questions?
This is very difficult questions, but very interesting. But it also, I'm going to take this question based in Singapore, right? Because the market structure is very different in Europe, for instance. What I would say in consultancy, what's nice is that like every 6, 12, or 18 months, you're gonna change maybe mission and do different kind of things. So you can quickly browse from different company process, different technology, and different kind of things. So that's definitely a plus for this. But it also depends on the consultancy mission, right? You know, that's the whole thing, right? You need to find the good one that got the good mission for you and cares about you also. And it's not just like a meat seller that just want to sells you for a daily rate and don't care about you, you know, then we say in French, then when he's got you a mission, it goes under a tunnel, you know, for many months, and you cannot call him because he's always under a tunnel. This is where also you can go into, there's two other choices, is startup or big, large corporate. If you go in startup, you're gonna do many different kind of things because what you've been asked, you don't have a definite role, right? There's so few people that you need to be able to do many different kind of things, which is very also you're gonna learn a lot from them. But let's be honest, is usually in terms of process, it's a bit of a mayhem, right? You know, it's a mess. In corporate structure, in very large company, those processes actually very nicely done because there's a lot of people that thinks about those process, and they will shape you into actually doing proper work. The only problem is that they move very slowly. They use technology that is already obsolete and whatnot, right? So this is about the pros and cons of the three kind of way you can go: consultancy, startup, or really big company. There's no preference, right? It's just in each one, you need to find the proper one because there's a lot to learn in all three different kind of things.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And Mayank actually had a great question. Sorry, Dylan had a great question that's top voted, which was about open source projects. Earlier we were saying, hey, it's really valuable when candidates can demonstrate that they've done pull requests on open source projects. How should we go about looking for open source projects to work on?
GitHub. So it depends on what you want to do, right? So I'm gonna say, for instance, for DevOps, right, which is more of my domain right now. So I would definitely go into, I can use and see all the technology related to this. So obviously what's coming to mind in Kubernetes, for instance, but a few other things that goes around with this, like, you know, maybe Flux or Argo CD if you want to focus on GitOps. Maybe you're curious about observability, so you're gonna try and see what's Prometheus and Grafana. Maybe you like CI, CD, so you'll go on to things like Tecton, and you browse the GitHub, right, for the technology you like. If it's backend, then you'll try to find a nice framework you like. Same for frontend, right? Because they've got so many frameworks for them. And you pick an issues. So in every GitHub, you know, there's the issues, and there's always a tag that is good for first contribution, something like that. I'll try to go for the contribution for documentation at first. There's always ticket because it requires a lot of effort. So there's always a need for someone to modify, you know, a bit of documentation here and there. And it's a really good bootstrapping process into this. It's just documentation, but it shows that you care, right? And it's still going through all the process and everything. So that's how you would do this, definitely. That's like if I have a candidate that I've contributed to one of the projects that I've mentioned, for instance, or whatever, that's like there's 99% chance that I'm gonna say yes, definitely.
Oh, that's awesome. Now we know, right? Documentation.
Yeah, it counts.
Alrighty. I want to be mindful of time. I know we're up at the hour, and Vincent and Ben have answered great answers to our questions. I know there are still some questions on the Pigeonhole. So if there are still other questions you'd like to follow up on, feel free to direct them to me afterward, and I'll direct them to Vincent and Ben to get answers as well. If not, I think we're running up. We're gonna close the session here. But before we go, first of all, thanks so much to Vincent and Ben. Round of applause. Thank you so much. Before we go, I would love to take a picture of all of us. So if you could on your cameras, thanks, Phil. He knows it's coming. Just so we can remember this day. Oh, nice. It's full screen. Okay, you guys ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. That's perfect. And when you close this window, you're gonna get a link to a feedback form. If you could please help us fill out that feedback form on how the AMA session went for you, that would really help us improve future AMA sessions. So thanks so much for helping us with that. Before we go, thanks again, Vincent and Ben. Thanks, Carol, for organizing the event, and
Thank you, guys.
have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.